So we're going to cover some use cases, some specific capture use cases, um, because basically, as we develop Reveille, as we're deploying it within our clients, we have some standard sort of test that always we seem to come back to, that there's certain requirements that are similar across all of the clients. And this is really what we're going to focus on. So again, hopefully you'll recognize some of these issues and you'll see them. You may have encountered them in your own environment. So your if you're a partner, your client's environments, and you'll recognize where these issues occur and how we resolve them. Hopefully it makes sense. Now, excuse me, there's four different use cases. The first one we're going to be looking at is around batch age. So within the system, as a batch is aging, when it gets to a certain age, we flag that. And then when the count of batches that are above that age goes a certain level, we flag that up. And then we may want to do something about it. And we'll come on to that when we get to the case study. The next one is license use. This is really about understanding the page use in the system. So monitoring that license utilization, because again, it's something that we've often heard that, we're using the system and we realize that too late that we're running out of license. We need to go back to the vendor and negotiating additional license, etc. So we want early notification that we want to be aware of exactly how many licenses you're using and flag up when that's getting to certain thresholds. The next one we'll be looking at is hung batches. So a batch that's it's not being progressed, it's hung, and the number of batches in a hung state has exceeded a predefined level. So again, what we do about that, how we can go and how we can flag that, and then looking at the actions we take, things like changing priority of batches. And then finally, the capture channels. How do we get information into the system? How do we get it out of the system? So it may be capturing via device, so scanner, or it may be coming in via email or fax. So how we monitor those channels, and if they're not being processed correctly, how we can flag that up and do something about it. Now, this screen you can see currently is what we call the web user console. And it's where we do our day-to-day administration within Reveille. So this first screen you can see is actually a high-level system view. It's telling us what's going on within our environment. But what we want to do is drill down into our monitors. Now, a monitor is really just, it's an item, it's looking at a specific part of our system. You can see here I've done this by product, but probably we'd look at servers, we'd look at functional areas. We wouldn't have it just at product level because we want to get more granularity, and it allows us to be flexible on how we run our administration for a particular environment. You can also see they're all different colors. The color represents the status of that particular environment. So the green ones are just telling them there's no issue. The blue one's not being run currently. So we can actually go in and filter these down. We can say, well, actually, all we want to look at are the ones with warnings. So this, the capture system and the info archive system. So let's filter those down and just look at those. Now, if I open up the capture environment, we're running down into the lower level. We're going into the actual monitor itself, and we're starting to see exactly what we cover within that monitor. Now, Ryan will have shared a document, a technical overview of all of the tests we've done for OpenText Capture. So that covers all of the different test groupings. So everything from connectivity, looking at batch exceptions, batch processing, backend database. All of these will be covered in that document. And you can see these are broken down by those categories within this monitor because it makes it helpful to actually show you that when we're going in. So this whole side here is looking at connectivity, those backend modules. So everything from image conversion, copy, import, export, etc. So they're all connecting to our capture server. In here, we can see we're having a pretty bad day. There's lots of things going wrong. So again, if you think back to those use cases that we were talking about previously, the first one being batch age. If we look in here, we can see if we go to process metrics, we can see that there's a test flagging up that the number of batches that are aging have gone above the level that we've defined as the maximum for this particular system. Now, what we're doing is when we're running Reveille, we're capturing information. So when we're looking at batch queues, we're looking at batches processed, tasks, activities, etc. We gather information into Reveille. So that allows us to look at that information. Allows us to go and start defining baselines for it to decide, how many batches should we be processing at this time of day. If it goes above or below a certain level, flag that. And again, because we have all of this information, we can also look at it. So this is where what we call Reveille dashboards come in. And dashboard is really just a way of viewing information on the system. It's allowing us to go in and looking at how we're excuse me, how we're gathering information, how it's being processed, and whether or not it's meeting the requirements for this particular system. So again, if we think to what we were talking about originally was batch aging, you can see here there's a couple of servers that are running against this. There's two servers. There's server one is running without issue, but server two, the number of batches that have aged has gone above the predefined threshold for that particular system. So we need to do something about that. We need to go into the system. And it might be anything from raising batch priorities for certain batches. It might be restarting a module, etc. We can do that manually, or we can also do that automatically with what we call a proactive action. So if we go into this back end system, this is the admin console where we define our monitors. We can do a lot of the administration through the user client, so the thin client. But when we set up these monitors, we typically do it through the administration client. So in here, if we go down to process metrics, we open that up, we can see here that this is the test that's failing, this process or batch aging. What we also have is if we go into here, we can see there's proactive actions. So in this instance, if we get those batches that are going over a certain age, we can tell the system automatically to do something about it. And here we're telling it to raise the batch priorities of the batches that are going over that specific age range. Again, we have lots of different actions we can carry out, and all of these are again defined by the work we've done with clients. So, for example, you come in, you work with a client, and they'll tell you that we need to raise exceptions, we need to clear a batch hold, we need to clear a batch task error, and you can see we have product-specific ones here. It's still called intelligent capture. That will be capture soon rather than intelligent capture. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, removing the intelligent, but let's assume it's still intelligent. Here we have, all of those product specific ones, but we also have more generic ones. It might be restarting a module, which is a service. It could be restarting a process. It could even be running a PowerShell script. So the ability to go in and say, just run this PowerShell script that we've written, and it will do multiple things for us potentially. So how we incorporate these is if we see there's a repeatable action that we can see a lot of our clients would like to use, we'll add that into the product. But if there's a very specific organizational specific action, it might be more appropriate to write a PowerShell script for that organization that they can run through this proactive action, but we won't roll back into the product set. So again, as I said before, the product is developed, its development is driven by our own clients and their requirements about how they need to monitor their particular capture environments. Now, the next issue we were talking about was license use, the ability to go in there and define exactly which licensing is available, what we're processing, etc. And this is where this resource comes in, capture licensing. So here we're looking at things like expiration date and status. We're also looking at license page count and connection count, the number of modules, number of license page users, etc. And again, if we go back into our dashboard, and we have a dashboard covering that as well. So here we're going to be looking at the number of remaining days, number of pages used, the percentage page used, etc. on the system. It's covering off the information about when this license is likely to run out and to flag up at the appropriate moment so we can do something about that as well. So we've got a license use percentage, we've got days to license expiration, we've got the number of page count, and how we've also got that evaluated. And here you can see the evaluation is that if anything drops below 30 million, we want to flag that up. We want to say, okay, if it drops below this level, flag it. And then it gives us time to start doing something about that as well. Now, again, if we go back into our admin client and we go to licensing, you can see here we've got a proactive action. You don't have to have a proactive action for these. These can be just a manual notification. So I'll get an email telling me that that's the case. In this instance, what we've done is the action is to raise a ticket in a separate ticketing system. So we have integrations with multiple different systems. So we have the ability to raise tickets in other systems, depending on what the issue is. We can raise it to allow the security team notification or the procurement team notification that they need to get additional tickets. And we also have the ability to access the information within Reveille. So we can use something like Power BI to access that information and produce a report. So not only can you produce the reports in dashboard form within Reveille, you can also use third-party tools to pull this information out and present it back, which is especially useful if you want reporting information from multiple different systems. So some from Reveille, but some from maybe existing monitoring tools you want to pull out all together and present in one report. The next specific use case was around hung batches. So again, if we go into batch exceptions, what we're looking at here is about when the number of hung batches goes above a certain level. So we'll have a predefined limit saying we can have this number of hung batches, but if it exceeds that, flag that up and let me know, because again, we need to do something about this. So again, if we look here, we can see on Capture Server 2, there's no issue. Oh, that's sorry, excuse me, batch exceptions. On Capture Server 2 here, we've got no issues. But on Capture Server 1, the number of batches, hung batches or batches on hold, have both exceeded that predefined minimum. You can also see here, I've showed that data in a slightly different way. What I've shown is what the current value for the metric is, and also which metrics are flagging up as an issue. So here you can see on server 1, current count is 73, and that's exceeding our threshold of 65. This is batches on hold. Here we can see hung batches. Currently on server 1, it's got to 10, and our threshold here is 8. So both of those are flagging up, telling us there's issues with both of those. Excuse me, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Now, again, if we want to think about what could we do in this instance? What issue, if we want to resolve that issue? If we go to our process exceptions, we can see the proactive job in here is actually changing batch priorities to 0 for these. So this is forcing the batch to restart. And again, notifying the admin team that there's an issue on the system. They need to do something about that as well. So it's automating the process. And if you think about why organizations have a product like Reveille, it's about not being surprised by issues of the system. We don't want the business to be telling us there's a problem, that the documents are not being released or the batches are not completing, so they haven't got access to the documents, or the processes are not being kicked off because the documents have not been available. What we're doing here is we're capturing this issue early, we're flagging it, and where we can, we're doing something about it. So hopefully it has no impact on the business, even though there's an issue with the capture environment. Now, the final one was input and output, how we get content into the system. So again, a lot of this will be about things like batch counts, understanding the task levels, making sure that they're all carrying out and they're all being completed in a timely fashion. But we also have specific tests for looking at things like file shares, looking at how they're coming into the system, how all those files are, whether they're being processed in a timely fashion. Excuse me. We also have the ability to look at email folders, so email systems that we're ingesting them in a timely fashion. Here you can see the emails are not being processed. And again, if we go back into our dashboard, we can see that, and we go to batch processing, we can see that information, and we can see where it's exceeding the thresholds in the system. Now, on this, again, like the others, we have a proactive action. So we have here, this is actually going to restart the import module. And, it might be just a workaround. It's not necessarily fixing it. So, although this information is now going above the expected level for email capture, again, in this instance, we can restart the module. We don't have to do that. It can be just a notification, but we know if that's a workaround to this issue and this the emails not being ingested, we can do that automatically to ensure they keep on being ingested until we get a permanent fix for that particular problem. So that sort of covered everything I wanted to. Again, just to reiterate the four use cases we were looking at. There was batch age, looking at how batches that have not been processed within a timely fashion, when the count of those batches goes above a certain level, the ability to raise batch priority to force that through. License use, again, when the license utilization, we've used the number of pages and it's dropped, the number of pages left has dropped below a certain level. So we want to acquire additional license. Hung batches, the ability to process hung batches, restart modules, etc., if required, or to change batch priority. And then finally, capture channels when the input of content into the system fails or the input slows down, so it goes above a certain level, number of files, a number of emails we've got to import, then we flag that up. And again, if potentially to resolve that, restart the export module.